Hello and welcome to another video from the greatest trout on YouTube, and it is my weekly Premier League roundup of all the games that happened at the weekend. It is week 12, which means we are almost a third into the season pretty much. We're pretty much there now. So yeah, it's been an interesting season so far, but this weekend was pretty crazy. A few dropped points for Arsenal and Manchester City, bringing it closer at the top. Chelsea once again lost, putting the pressure on Mourinho, who wasn't even in the stadium, and Vardy made it 9 in 9 to get closer to that Premier League record of Ruud van Nistelrooy. We'll start there with a 12:45 game, Bournemouth versus Newcastle, which I watched on BT Sport, and well, Bournemouth really should have won this. I mean, I've said in the past that I was worried about Bournemouth. I said that at the start of the season, but really they had to win this game and they didn't. I mean, Newcastle were very, very poor, and it's quite ironic, really, how Newcastle have actually been playing well recently. Probably the best they've played in a very, very long while against Stoke and against Sunderland, and only came away with 1 point in 6. And they played terribly here against Bournemouth, a team they really should do well against, considering they're newly promoted, and somehow managed to pick up the 3 points. Was a Jose Perez finish, who was really quite confident in this game. Had the fans booing him. He really is coming into his own, Jose Perez, and wouldn't be surprised in the next few seasons if he gets a big money move. So yeah, really, Bournemouth, they just lack the cutting edge though. I mean, they were pretty much all over Newcastle. Rob Elliott had to make hundreds of saves. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how many saves he actually made overall. I mean, perfect goalkeeper for fantasy football this weekend. But yeah, they didn't have Murray in there. They had King, and this King guy hasn't really been, this Josh King guy hasn't really been hitting off the mark. I mean, you always know that Murray can bag you a couple of goals. He's that type of striker who will get you goals if you supply him well. Usually it was crosses for him, and Wilson was obviously on fire before he got injured. But so King really seems like the third choice striker to me. He reminds me a lot of Graben, really, where he's all right at getting in behind. He's all right with link-up play. He's sort of all right at a lot of things, but his finishing is not too great. I mean, maybe he'll prove me wrong later in the season, but I doubt it at this point. He really should have scored in this game, and so should many other players like Gosling, yeah, and a couple of others. Really, Newcastle, well, they didn't lose the game, but they really didn't get control of the game simply because of their midfield. It was pretty much non-existent. Anita was terrible, and I think it was Tiote who was also partnering him in that midfield. Pretty much non-existent, and when you have Papa Cisse trying to hold it up in the last 20 minutes, you're really probably not going to get anywhere. But McLaren did change up the system a bit after Bournemouth threatened at the start of the second half, and that was sort of enough to keep Bournemouth out a bit more, and that probably sealed the win for Newcastle. And really, Bournemouth had to get the goal sooner or later, otherwise they were just going to, you knew it would be a difficult task for them in the last 30 minutes if they hadn't scored one by the time it had reached that time. So yeah, Bournemouth need to turn it around quickly, and they need to have sort of a bit of a reshuffle and a bit of a change of tactics over the international break. Moving on to the 3 o'clock games, then we have Leicester versus Watford, and Aurelio Gomez. What happened to him here? He turned into his old Spurs self, where he had 2 absolute howlers. First of all, N'Golo Kante just got a little bit of room. He teased the defenders a couple of times, hit quite a tame shot. I mean, Gomez really should have saved this, but it somehow just sort of, I don't think it quite went through his legs, but it just sort of one of those P-rollers that sort of went past his arms somehow, and really that put Watford up against it. And then Leicester made it 2-0. Great running behind from Vardy. He is always in those positions to get in behind, and they always know where he is. It's just fantastic as a striker, having the players behind you, putting you in, and I mean, you need to make those runs as well. And he's making a lot of effort, but he is getting rewarded for it, and that's nice to see. But yeah, Gomez just brings him straight down, clatters straight into him. Terrible challenge. Got nowhere near the ball. Very clumsy. And Vardy made it 2-0. Got his 9th in 9. Only one more game to equal Van Nistelrooy's record for the Premier League. I think there is some other guy who's actually scored in 11 consecutive games, but that obviously wasn't in the Premier League. But people forget that because many people think the football was created in the 90s. But yeah, this was an interesting game, really, Leicester and Watford, because they're two teams that are probably I can't really think of many other teams recently that have come this far. I mean, you especially look at Leicester. They're in the, I think they're still in the top 4 at the moment, and Watford are powering on this season. And when you consider they're having that epic game in the Championship a couple of seasons ago, I could see Leicester and Watford very much being the next sort of Swansea and Southamptons. Maybe if Swansea and Southampton start falling down the league, which it looks like Swansea might be doing at the moment, they could very much start replacing them in those positions and really start setting into the Premier League well. We'll see how Watford go this season and whether they have second season syndrome, but Leicester are definitely on their way to establishing themselves in the Premier League again, especially under Ranieri. Moving on to the Manchester United West Brom game, and this was a relatively predictable game really. You knew that West Brom were just going to sit back, and you knew that it was going to be there was going to be a lot of testing from United. They were going to stick to Van Hol's philosophy of passing it around, and luckily Lingard was able to curl a nice little shot in. Lingard was actually pretty good in this game, taking on quite a few players a lot of the time. But yeah, it was worrying in the first half that we basically made Johnny Evans look like Paolo Maldini or an informed John Terry. I mean, we really needed to do better there, but I'm just happy that we've got the 3 points really after the points that we've been dropping recently, especially with City and Arsenal dropping points this weekend in probably unexpected fashion. It's also nice to see Martial start up front, and to be fair, it was quite, well, not really ironic, but it was quite telling that Rooney went off, and then basically straight away Herrera found a perfect pass straight into Martial, and we won a penalty off that. I mean, instantly you could just see how the pace improved in the attack. But that's just me, and then we also got the penalty. Mata buried it to make it 2-0 and sealed the deal. McCauley also got sent off, which screwed me over on fantasy football. Damn you, Ronald Koeman, for not playing Cedric and making McCauley come off my bench and give me -2 points. Yeah, the other slight worry was the fact that we didn't track Berahino for his header, one of West Brom's only real chances in the game, and that would have been a pretty horrific way to end up dropping points and drawing 1-1, because he just came in and no one was marking him, and he probably should have scored as well. Moving on to Sunderland versus Southampton, not really much to say here. Southampton deserved to win. They dominated the majority of the game, and they won it really off a reckless challenge from Mvira. And I did say in my blog recently that Sunderland have to get a bit more discipline under Allardyce, and I thought Allardyce might install that, but there's still a lot of niggling problems at Sunderland that Allardyce is going to have to sort out very, very quickly. But meanwhile, I mean, Southampton are just rolling along quite nicely now. But as I said, damn you, Koeman, for not playing Cedric. That would have got me 6 points, and so it got me -2 points. Moving on to Norwich versus Swansea. This was a very interesting game. I was wondering what the result would be in this, because neither of the two sides have been playing well, but Norwich don't always go well at home, but Swansea haven't been playing well at all. And it was quite a scrappy game, and I mean, Swansea had a lot of possession, but they really didn't do enough with it, and Norwich pretty much scrapped the victory. I mean, when Howson scores and you win in a 1-0 game, you know, maybe the other team haven't threatened you that much, and it's also been quite scrappy. But it's quite interesting to see once again, Mbakani involved in the Norwich goal, coming off the bench this time. And as I said before, I think he just needs to play, because he can score goals and he can set people up, and he's just a bit more of a presence than Jerome, I think. And he does remind me of Drogba a bit, a sort of a poor man's Drogba, really, with the way he sort of is so dominant sometimes in the box. And I think he can cause a lot of problems, and he caused problems again here for Swansea. Brady was also very good for Norwich, giving Swansea a lot of problems, and he could be a crucial player for Norwich as well, along with Jarvis. If they can start whipping balls into Mbakani, then Norwich could start doing a lot better. And really, this was a better performance from Norwich though, because Neil, I think in his post-match interview, did say that they decided they were going to set up a bit differently, and it clearly showed in this game, because they absorbed a lot of attacks and possession against them, but still managed to come away with the win. And it'll be interesting to see if Neil will continue with this way, and then maybe I'll have to consider bringing Martin back into my fantasy football, and maybe Norwich will be able to stay up, because Bournemouth aren't looking good, Sunderland aren't looking good, and Villa are still not looking too safe at the moment. So it's better for Norwich, definitely. Definitely worrying for Gomes, so who really hasn't scored in a long while, and I worry about just how Gomes is going to go. Was he a bit of a, not really even sort of a half season wonder, because he was all right after Boney left, but recently he's been very, very poor and hasn't been scoring too much. Moving on to West Ham versus Everton. This was again sort of an expected result, really. It's very hard to separate these two sides. Maybe you'd give Everton the edge, but with West Ham at home it sort of equals out. And really there were two pieces of quality really that got the goals in this game. Lanzini was a fantastic finish, just sort of lobbing the keeper in a way, but sort of finessing it into the top corner to put West Ham ahead. But Everton got back into the game. It was a delicious pass from Deulofeu straight through to Lukaku, splitting the defence. Lukaku took it around the goalkeeper and once again scored. Lukaku really is on fire, and Everton just have that understanding this season of where the players will be on the pitch, and just sort of have a telepathic connection in their attack, really. And they'll win a lot of games this season, and both teams are maybe rank outside the top four, especially West Ham, but they can definitely push for Europe this season with the failures of Chelsea and the general cock-ups of Liverpool and Spurs, I guess, knowing history. Moving on to the 5:30 game, Stoke versus Chelsea, and obviously Stoke beating Chelsea here 1-0. Chelsea weren't exactly poor. They had an alright first half, but really it was just poor defending again. Baba Rahman, I think it is, the guy who came in over the summer for Chelsea at right back, I believe, or I think it was actually, yeah, it was left back there, I think. Just let Glenn Johnson, of all people, get the better of him, in behind him, and then he pulled it back, and it eventually found its way to Arnautovic, who did a very nice finish, was a sort of volley just past Begovic against his old club. Not a great return for him. But the only player that I really saw do that well for Chelsea was Pedro. Pedro was causing a lot more problems, maybe because he had a bit more of rest. And yeah, I think Costa needs to give them more instead of just stiffing the armpits and complaining about the smell of the armpits of opposition players. I guess he needs a bit better service as well, really. He's not the type of striker that's really going to thrive well when he doesn't get good service, but then again not many would do. But obviously Fabregas being well out of form is costing him there. And yeah, really worrying times for Chelsea again, and I still think they're going to keep the faith in Mourinho for a very long time. This could go on for a very, very long time. It could go into the next new year potentially. See how this goes. I can see him eventually getting sacked at this rate. And I mean, the last thing Mourinho and Chelsea need here was someone being honest when getting through on goal, and Remy could have gone down pretty much in the 6-yard box, but he decided he was going to keep upright and avoid contact with the keeper, which was fair enough, but it's the last thing Chelsea needed at that point, and really doesn't help their cause at all. So it'll be interesting to see how Chelsea go in the next couple of games, see if they can change anything over the international break. Moving on to the Sunday games, we have Villa versus Manchester City, and a surprise result really. Villa getting a point at home, and at points they had City on the ropes a bit, at points with sort of a few nice breaks, but obviously the quality just let them down. I think that's my worry for Villa, just the quality letting them down. I think there's a high possibility that Remy Gardner, I think his name is, will sort of get them a bit more organised, like they seem to do in this game. And I mean, I think he's already banned French at the club, so he seems quite hard line, similar to maybe not quite similar to an Allardyce, but sort of he's a bit less. He's different to Sherwood, let's just put it that way. He's a bit more tactically astute and organised, I guess, from what I've seen and what I've heard. But really, I think the crucial thing here that you can take away for Manchester City really is just they have a bit of a striker problem at the moment, because Wilfred Boney just isn't really doing enough at the moment, and I've seen quite a few City supporters sort of lambasting him really, sort of in a similar mould to Rooney, really. He didn't offer much in the Manchester derby, and he hasn't offered much recently, other than that game where him and Sterling tore, I think it was Bournemouth, a bit of a nil arsehole. But yeah, really, they need Aguero to come back soon. I think he probably will be back after the international break, but I mean, if Aguero continues to get injured, that will definitely be a weakness for City, and points they may need to go on this season. If they don't have Aguero, then they may struggle for that, and it may cost them in the title race, especially with well, points to form of Arsenal. Moving on to Arsenal, though, they only drew with Spurs in a very, very poor performance at home here. Spurs probably should have won this North London derby. They were all over Arsenal for very long spells of this game, and just seem to have so much confidence in this game, especially after going 1-0 up. Harry Kane was a very odd goal. Koscielny really not tracking Kane at all. Complete cock-up in the defence between Koscielny and Mertesacker, and there were a lot of holes emerging. There was also another one where Kane just had acres of space as Koscielny didn't track him, and I think as Monreal was dragged out of position. So that was worrying for Arsenal. It maybe shows that they still don't have a leader at the back there. I mean, would a Smalling or a company have let Harry Kane in behind there? I'm not sure. But really, bringing in Cech doesn't seem to have helped out those defensive fragilities. The only hope for them, really, to push for the title is if Ozil can keep in form, and really, he was in form here. I mean, he didn't have his greatest game, but he did manage to dig Arsenal out of the crap here, really, by putting a delicious ball into Kieran Gibbs, who Wenger brought off the bench, who tucked it in to make it 1-1, and really, that saved their bacon a bit here. So, and it proves how good Ozil's been this season, because he didn't play too great, but he still managed to get an assist in a very important game. But if they can get Sanchez firing and Giroud scoring a similar amount of his of goals that he usually scores, and Ozil can keep in this form, then there's definitely a possibility that they can keep the fight on here, I think, and push City all the way, especially with City's fragilities and title battles a lot of the time. And moving on to Liverpool versus Palace, and there's really not much to say here other than Liverpool are back. So thank you for watching, guys, and until next time, goodbye.